country's history. The self-proclaimed mayor of the town in eastern Ukraine on Sunday, site of much of the tension right now, appealed to Russian President Vladimir Putin to, quote, send the army as peacekeepers. The request came as a shout out to the checkpoint after a shootout at a checkpoint manned by pro-Russian militia members near the city of Sloviansk. Left at least 3 people dead and others wounded with gunshots. Russia blamed militant Ukrainian nationalists for the attack. The Ukrainian government said it was staged by provocateurs from outside the country. The attack came despite an international agreement being reached in Geneva last week aimed at easing tensions in eastern Ukraine, where armed pro-Russian activists have seized government buildings in at least 10 cities. Such clashes could provide pretext for Russia to seize more Ukrainian territory.
And speaking of that, John, that's why we're pleased to be joined by our man in Moscow, professor at the Russian Academy of National Economy, Mark Nuckols. Mark, we always appreciate your insights via Skype. Last week, we made a big deal about Russians being suspicious of guys who smile. What about the notion of subtlety in terms of Russian foreign policy and a recent incident that may offer an illustration of what the Russians are up to?
Well, that's an interesting word, subtlety, which is something Russians are not particularly good at, especially the Kremlin. You may well know there was the shooting incident near Sloviansk yesterday where 3 people at a pro-Russian checkpoint were killed. And interestingly enough, in the car that was left behind, purportedly there was a business card for the leader of one of the main far-right nationalist groups in Ukraine, the right sector, and a stack of US dollars. Now, if I was going to attack a pro-Russian checkpoint, and I didn't want anyone to trace back the origins of who I was working for, I think the last thing I would do is leave a business card with my boss's name on it and a stack of US dollars that were given to me by my CIA handlers in Kiev. So to me, it very definitely seems to have been a provocation that was staged to appear to have been an attack by far-right Ukrainian nationalists on a pro-Russian checkpoint.
Mark, we've only got about a minute left, but there was another incident last week, a report that Jews in a certain eastern Ukrainian community were basically required to register property and all sorts of things, and that brings back horrible memories of what happened with the Third Reich. Any notion as to who's behind all that, Mark?
I suspect one party or another is trying to paint a very black picture of some other party or interest or group by, again, staging some kind of provocation of this sort. But it's unclear at this point who exactly that is.
Well, you not only have a lack of subtlety, Mark, but you have the proverbial fog of war. And as always, Mark Nuckols, we thank you for cutting through some of the fog to give us your real-life, on-the-ground assessment there from Moscow in Russia. Very much appreciated, sir.
I think we're going to get the professor to stick around for us to continue this conversation. Also, JD, we had that story from the New York Times about the insignia, the uniforms, the weapons matching Russian special forces. So we'll talk to the professor about that. Much more to come here on America's Forum. Never too late to reach out to us on social media. You can find us on Twitter @NewsmaxTV, #America's Forum. We're back after this.